In November 2006, a filmmaker walked into her West Village office to work on what would become one of the most beloved independent films of the decade. By evening, police were calling it suicide. Her husband didn't believe it. Her friends didn't believe it either. And within days, a single shoe print would unravel a story far darker than anyone imagined. This is the story of Adrienne Shelly, a woman who built her career fighting to be heard, only to have her voice silenced just as the world was finally ready to listen. Adrienne Shelly was born Adrienne Levine in Queens, New York, to Jewish parents Sheldon Levine and Elaine Langbaum. She had two brothers. Long Island became home. She took the last name Shelly professionally. It was her father's name, and grief marked her early. She lost her father young. She carried his name forward, wore it in every audition, every role. Around 10, she started performing at Stage Door Manor Performing Arts Training Center. Then she went to Boston University and she studied film production. In junior year, she dropped out and moved to Manhattan. She walked away from a degree to figure things out in New York City, which tells you who she was. She didn't wait for permission. In Manhattan, Shelley co-founded Missing Children, an off-Broadway theater company staging productions in the West Village. She wasn't chasing the spotlight the controversial way. She built something instead, created her own infrastructure to do the work she cared about. Shelley's breakthrough came when independent filmmaker Hal Hartley cast her as the lead in The Unbelievable Truth movie, which was released in 1989, and Trust in 1990. These films were a particular strain of American independent cinema, still finding its shape. Hartley had become a key figure in American independent film movement of 80s and 90s. His films leaned into deadpan humor, offbeat characters delivering philosophical dialogue like they were ordering of coffee. The Unbelievable Truth in 1988, shoestring budget, filmed on his native Long Island, an unconventional love story between a suburban teenager who falls for a handsome mechanic with a criminal past. Shelley played the teenager. What made her casting work wasn't just that she looked the part, she understood Hartley's voice instantly. The film received positive reviews, nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at the 1990 Sundance Film Festival. Not a small thing for a debut feature film in under 2 weeks on Long Island with almost no budget. The movie Trust in 1988 followed the similar theme and style, again starring Shelley, this time as a Long Island teenager forming a complex romantic relationship with a mysterious computer repairman. She earned even greater praise, playing a sullen, pregnant teenager who carelessly caused her father to drop dead before taking up with a social misfit played by Martin Donovan. Her acting style attracted Hartley's attention, who cast her in the leads in both films, playing back-to-back Sundance Film Festivals in 1990 and 91. That 2-year run at Sundance was rare for any filmmaker. Hartley's films provided career launches for actors including Adrienne Shelly herself, Eddie Falcao, James Urbanic, Martin Donovan, Karen Silas, and Elena Lovenson. Shelley was at the front of that list, the one who made people stop and pay attention. Shelley guest starred in television series including Law and Order, Oz, Homicide, Life on the Street, and many more. She played major roles in over 24 off-Broadway plays, often at Manhattan's Workhouse Theater. She worked constantly across multiple formats, film, television, theater, but the acting work she was getting in the mid-90s wasn't satisfying her anymore. She was not someone who settled for just showing up. She needed more. Then she turned away from Hollywood glitter towards the grit of independent film, developing strong feelings about the objectification of women on screen. Women belonged behind the camera and screen as well as in front. That belief wasn't abstract for her. It was professional strategy. She started taking concrete steps toward directing in early 90s. In 1994, she wrote and directed a 26-minute short urban legend movie, a project allowing her to experiment with narrative structure and independent production. She described it as a New York City fairy tale. That film was proving ground. 2 years later came the real debut. Sudden Manhattan is a 1996 comedy film written and directed by and starring Shelley herself. Shelley pulled off a kind of absurd realism similar to Martin Scorsese's After Hours, where death feels around the corner and supporting characters skew towards the grotesque, but her film was a few shades brighter, more focused on her protagonist's internal perception of the world. Before it pierced the mainstream, Shelley was a front frontrunner, a woman who directed 3 films about empowered women during a decade when the conversation around gender parity in Hollywood was only a whisper. She was doing in the 1990s what the entire industry would eventually, painfully, be forced to reckon with decades later. She was ahead of her time in wanting to have it all: marriage, a family, and a career. After a series of go-nowhere romances, she joined a dating site. That's how she met Andy Ostroy. This was before online dating was considered normal. She wasn't embarrassed by it. She was practical. Photos capturing Shelly and Ostroy's trip to Paris and his proposal there are lovely. So too is their traditional Jewish wedding, where she vowed to love Ostroy's children from his previous marriages as if they were her own. By all accounts, the marriage was genuinely happy. Police would later hear from Ostroy that her professional prospects were bright. She was happily married and she adored their 2-year-old daughter Sophie. Then came the turning point. The movie Waitress is a 2007 American comedy film written and directed by Shelly herself, starring Carrie Russell as a young woman, Jenna, trapped in a small town and an abusive marriage, facing an unwanted pregnancy while working as a waitress. It's a film about a woman who finds small, creative ways to survive a life that isn't giving her what she needs, which turned out to be one of the most universally relatable things Shelly ever put on screen. That was her final work, involved writing, directing, co-set, and costume designing herself, and acting in the film. Shelly's supporting role in Waitress is her final film appearance. She played Dawn, one of the other waiters at the diner. Her dream was to get the film into Sundance Film Festival, which did happen, but Shelly never knew because her life ended before the notifications were sent. Shelly used a Greenwich Village 4th floor apartment as her office, located at 15 Abingdon Square, New York. It was a workspace she rented specifically to write and edit, separate from her home, a place where she could focus. On November 1, 2006, she was there working. Andy knew his wife had been working in her Manhattan office, a West Village apartment Adrienne rented specifically as a work studio. After a long day without any contact, Ostroy became worried. Andy drove to the apartment building. Upon arriving, he asked the building's doorman to accompany him up to Shelly's unit. The 2 men found the apartment door unlocked. As they entered, they searched for Shelly. Then they found her body hanging from a bed sheet in the bathroom. One end of the bed sheet had been tied to the shower rod with an elaborate knot, while the other end was wrapped around her neck. Initially, her death was ruled suicide because of the way her body was found. Police conducted a brief review and reached that conclusion, but the scene had details that didn't fit. Police were hesitant to label the case suicide, observing that no note was found and sneaker prints that did not match Shelly's shoes were recovered from the site. Those 2 things, no note and a shoe print that wasn't hers, were not adding up in the suicide theory. Friends and family doubted that Shelly would kill herself with a younger daughter and a film, Waitress, that had just been accepted at a Sundance Film Festival. Shelly's Unbelievable Truth co-star Julia McNeil flew to New York to make sure the cops knew they were wrong. Shelly's husband Andy and her producer Michael Ruoff knew she was content at that point in her life. There was no way she would leave her daughter behind. The people who knew her best were certain. They pushed back hard enough that the investigation kept moving. The medical examiner determined that Shelly was still alive when she was hung. A woman who is alive when hung is not a suicide. She is a homicide victim whose death is staged. The manner of her passing was determined to be strangling. From that point forward, this was a murder investigation. They found dusty footprints on the toilet seat. That print on the toilet seat explained how someone had elevated her body to stage the hanging, and it was physical evidence that broke the case open. The print was matched to other shoe prints in the building where construction work had been done the day of Shelly's death. Detectives focused on the construction crew working in the building. Police spoke with the person in charge of the construction project, identifying Wilson Pilko as the foreman. Detectives then visited Wilson at his Brooklyn residence. Wilson answered the door. Detectives observed a backpack on the floor with a pair of sneakers jutting out. Wilson explained the bag belonged to his 19-year-old brother Diego Pilko, a construction worker who had illegally immigrated from Ecuador, who was also in home when detectives arrived. The shoes matched the one found at the crime scene, which the ADA referred to as the golden slipper. A single single shoe print preserved at a crime scene had led investigators directly to the killer's front door. Diego Pilco was arrested on November 6 and confessed on tape to attacking Shelly and staging the fake suicide. Pilco's original version claimed that when Shelly demanded the construction noise be kept down, he threw a hammer at her, afraid she might make a complaint that could result in his deportation. Since he had immigrated into US illegally, he followed her back to her apartment. Pilco said Shelly slapped him when he grabbed her at her apartment door. He retaliated by punching her in the face, knocking her to the floor where she hit her head and fell unconscious. Believing he had killed her, he then hanged her to make it appear suicide. But that version had problems. Investigators agreed that the story didn't match up, noting there was no construction dust on Shelly's shoes, which would have been the case if she had confronted Pilco in the downstairs apartment. The version of events was also not supported given the lack of head trauma and the presence of neck compression as the cause of death. The medical evidence flatly contradicted the story he was telling. Prosecutors thought that if charged with murder, Pilco might return to his original version and a jury trial could find him guilty of a lesser charge. So they made a calculated legal move, charged him with second-degree murder, and see if he had traded the truth for a reduced sentence. Pilco was charged with a second-degree murder and eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges of first-degree manslaughter. As a part of plea deal, he was required to give a full confession in court, finally revealing what really happened. In court, Pilco gave a second, fundamentally different statement. Pilco admitted to the court that he was robbing Shelly when he killed her. He said he had eaten his lunch in the basement and was walking back up the stairs to resume working when he saw Shelly going up to her flat. He said that when he saw her, he decided to rob her. Pilco told the court he saw her fourth-floor apartment door was open, so he stepped in and grabbed her purse. When he was putting the purse back, Shelly entered the room. Through a Spanish interpreter, he said the lady was waving for him to give back her purse. After checking it and finding something missing, she moved to call the police. He admitted taking the phone, covering her mouth out of desperation, and scared and unaware of what was happening, he decided to choke her after spotting a sheet. He still owed $12,000 to smugglers for helping him get into the country. Hoped any cash he got from Shelly would help him pay off the debt. That was the full, real motive, a robbery. He saw an opportunity, followed a woman into her home, took her purse, panicked, and when she caught him, he then choked her to death with a bedsheet. Then, inspired by some Spanish-speaking TV serial, he staged Shelly's death to look like a suicide. When he added that he sought forgiveness from her family, the judge replied with skepticism, doubting he would receive it. Police sources also believed he may have intended to sexually assault her, though it was never been accounted or never fully resolved. Pilco pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. On March 6, 2008, he received a 25-year prison sentence without the possibility of parole. He was also scheduled to be deported to Ecuador upon release. When Pilco was sentenced, Shelly's husband and family members made it clear they would never forgive him, and he called Pilco nothing more than a cold-blooded killer and said he hoped he would rot behind bars. Shelly's husband sued contractor Bradford General Contractors, which had hired Pilco. The complaint alleged that Shelly would still be alive if the contracting firm had not hired him. Ostroy also sought to hold the owners and management of the building liable for Shelly's murder. On July 7, 2011, Judge Louis York dismissed the lawsuit, ruling that Ostroy had failed to establish legal grounds for holding the contractor responsible. The judge acknowledged sympathy for Ostroy's loss but concluded that the plaintiffs had not presented significant legal grounds to hold Bradford liable for Pilco's vicious crime. The civil case was closed. The criminal one was concluded. But for Andy and their daughter Sophie, none of it constituted anything close to resolution. Almost 3 months after her murder, Shelly's husband Andy and the cast were left to celebrate the film and its writer-director as Waitress screened at the January festival in Park City, Utah. Ostroy was convinced his wife's confident choices and care in helming the film would have launched her as one of the major writer-director of the time. Its success led Fox Searchlight Pictures to acquire the distribution rights for $4 to $5 million. The film received mostly positive reviews with an 89% fresh rating among the 171 critic reviews. Ostroy announced his intention to create the foundation after 30 13 days of the murder. While still in the middle of the worst thing a person can go through, he was already thinking about how to channel what her wife stood for into something that kept moving. After his wife's death, Ostroy established the Adrienne Shelly Foundation, a non-profit organization that awards scholarships, production grants, finishing funds, and living stipends through its partnerships with academic and filmmaking institutions including NYU, Columbia University, Women in Film, IFP, AFI, Sundance Institute, and many more. This isn't a small memorial fund, it's a functioning institution embedded in an infrastructure of American independent cinema. That is all for today's video. As always, if you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye and good night.